when I'm getting to the bag, ayy. Got the foot on the gas, pedal to the metal when the lane moving fast, ayy. Let them all cross. If they hate, then let them hate and make a bigger boss, ayy.
This episode is brought to you by SPI Logistics, the premier freight agent logistics firm in North America. For over 40 years, SPI has been diligently building the most successful freight agent network to provide first-class relationships for our shippers, receivers, and carrier partners. We are more than another transportation network. We are a dedicated team of professionals united by one singular purpose, and that is to expedite our agents' success. All of our agents are set up for success on day one, as they are provided with a full suite of support staff that is ready to assist them with everything from after-hours emergencies to financial and administrative needs on a no-fee basis. This way, you can focus on continuing to grow your business. There is no financial risk to start, and you have the ability to earn up to 75% in commissions. If you are looking to take control of your financial future and build your business with the backing of one of the most successful logistics firms in North America, visit www.spi3pl.com to learn more. Do me a favor and let them know that the Freight Coach sent you. Hey guys, before we jump into the episode, I wanted to let you know it is brought to you by the NMFTA. Let me ask you a question. Do you ship LTL freight? Then listen up, because the NMFC changes went live on July 19th, and they're the biggest updates in the history of freight classification. Now more than ever, accuracy matters. That's why carriers, shippers, and brokers alike are turning to Class IT Plus, the NMFTA's new digital platform for real-time NMFC data. Stop guessing, start classifying smarter, and quote freight with confidence. It's time to get your ship together because the NMFC changes are already here. Learn more at nmfcchanges.com and get started with Class IT Plus at classitplus.com. Just do me a favor and let them know that the Freight Coach sent you. What is up, ladies and gentlemen? We are back. We are live. It is the Freight Coach Podcast, the top podcast in transportation, coming to you guys every single weekday, 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Central, to break down some industry headlines. But most importantly, you guys provide some actual insight into what you can do with all of this information. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. This is the real side of freight, ladies and gentlemen. And I do say that before every single show. And what I mean by that is I only speak with transportation professionals, because at the end of the day, I want to talk to the right individuals who have done what you're looking to do or who are currently doing what you're trying to achieve, so you can take that information, apply it, utilize it, and see a meaningful difference in your business and your life. Happy Monday, everybody. I got a very special guest for you guys here today. I always love talking to this guy. A, he's awesome, but B, he's got such a unique background in the industry. Like it's very rare that you find an individual who's driven trucks and then is now like head of cybersecurity out there. Like he's the only one I know who's taken that career path. And we're going to have a really good conversation today about a lot of this stuff. So I want to welcome my friend, Mr. Ben Wilkens, back on the show. Ben, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Oh, you bet, Chris. I'm happy to be on here.
So, I mean, Ben, I got to ask, man, did you ever think when you were driving, like, hey, in a couple of years, I'm going to be all cybersecurity all day long?
No, that was not the plan at the time. Life just dictated coming off the road after a number of years. And, I think that happens to a lot of people in the industry. And I ended up in dispatch and kind of supporting back office support. And, we had a couple of near misses in the place that I was at, and it really got my interest peaked again. I'd been into computers and technology and stuff as a hobby my whole life, but pulled me back in that direction and never looked back from there.
I got a lot of different angles I want to go with this. Do you think that most organizations don't even think they're a target for cyber attacks and everything else, so that's why they're not paying attention to it? Or is it now that people are starting to see all the interconnectedness of it, it's becoming more of a hot button issue?
Yeah, I think there's been a common misconception, especially among the smaller and mid-sized organizations, that there wasn't really a target on them. They weren't a big corporation. They weren't a billboard brand that everybody had in mind when they thought, cyber attack. The difference is those are the ones that make the news. But there's a host of small and mid-sized businesses that get hit all the time. And, they absolutely have a target on their back because of a lower level of cybersecurity, not just awareness, but of resources to devote to cybersecurity specifically. They probably don't have in-house staff. They may rely on an outside, a contractor or vendor. And they just don't have the budget for all of the tooling that some of the larger enterprises have. So it's definitely, that's been a misconception for a long time, but I think that we're starting to see that change, and there's more of an awareness that we all need to focus on this. Transportation is critical infrastructure, so our security is actually a national security matter when you really boil it down.
No, and I like, the more and more I think about this, and again, I credit the relationship that we have, between the NMFTA and myself, and just you and I are talking a lot off air as well at the cybersecurity conference in particular over the years. I'm starting to see that it's just not your typical spoofing of because I joke around with people. I wish the double brokering was just the way that it used to be, right? Where it's like they just take a couple $100 off the top and call it good, that they still pick up and deliver it. But to your point, it is a matter of national security. And I think it's almost beyond that now. And there's a lot of different parts that contribute into this. It's not just a cyber perspective. It's how they're getting those individuals who are part of those organizations even behind the wheel. But now it's like they are able to manipulate a lot of these shipments from, other countries, right? Like they don't have to physically be here in the United States. And, and especially now with AI going from seemingly nobody knew anything about it to now it's an integral part of most people's lives, where it's like the opportunities for people to access your system are exponentially greater than they were. And it's like the awareness that you guys put out as an organization is unmatched, for starters. But on top of that, it's like you guys take it what I think is the right way, right? Like, hey, let's take it and let's do that ground up approach here, you guys. So like the everyday person who, most people can define AI by the acronym, right? AI, right? Like, of course we know what AI is, but I think a lot of people need to understand that, like, you have to protect your organization of all sizes at this point.
Absolutely, because when we think of AI, again, like you said, it's sort of this broad, nebulous concept that everybody knows AI is ChatGPT or whatever tool that you're using, but it's a lot bigger than that, and it's baked into a lot of the software that we're integrating into our operations now, and we may not even know that we're utilizing an AI-powered tool in the operation and understand what kind of risk that introduces to your operation. The data is just going in there and it goes off somewhere else, and we don't really think about it a lot of times. But we need to understand, where is it being processed? How is it being used? Is it being mixed with other organizations' data for training purposes? There's a big difference between public LLMs and, a private instance in an organization. And we need to think about things like that as we bring AI into the operation.
So what is the difference between an AI model and an AI tool? Because to me, there's it's not as self-explanatory as you would think.
So to break this down kind of into familiar terms for our industry, if you think about an AI model, that's the engine, that's under the hood. That's what's powering the entire thing. The AI tool is like the truck that goes around it. That's everything else. That's the chassis. That's the wiring, the steering wheel, everything. That's using the AI model for some purpose, right? To power this AI tool. It could be predictive maintenance tools. They could be, a generative tool like a chatbot. It could be any number of different tools that are built on top of these models. But there's really a limited number of these foundational models, or frontier models, they call them. You have your OpenAI, you've got, Anthropic, you've got Google's got one, Microsoft's, got their own. So all of these are the models that function underneath the tools that are being built.
Mm-hmm. Is this something, so is it kind of like the Wild West out there? Like, is there any parameters that are set up out there that protects the information you're even putting into it, right? Because how many people put stuff into ChatGPT, for example, and it's actually potentially a public data source, and now everything you're telling it is being, sold out there, right? I think everybody's had an instance at this point, and the correlation I'm trying to make is you signed up for something with your email address, and then all of a sudden you got 87 other newsletters coming in because that company sold your data to somebody else.
Mm. It's a little bit different with the generative models, but you have to understand, if you're using, the public or your personal account, You don't have the same protections over what happens to your data as you do if you're in an enterprise account. So those are kind of sandbox environments where the data you put into your enterprise account for one of these tools has more protections around it, and it's more isolated, and it's not necessarily used for training these public models. But if we think about like shadow IT in the past, people brought their own hardware in or things like that. We now have shadow AI, where people are using personal AI tools, personal generative models, or generative accounts, and they're using those for work purposes because they don't necessarily have the right tools in the organization provisioned and put out for the employees to use. So those are not protected by these enterprise controls, those personal accounts that maybe somebody in dispatch is feeding information in to analyze a number of different rate cons or something, and that information is now going out and being used for training data potentially. And it's not as secure. That account is not as secure as if you provision enterprise grade accounts for your employees for that purpose.
Is that so? Is this the importance of, because like I kind of see this when, because we send out certain files from our podcast and then people are replying with their Gmail account. And I'm like, that's not your work one that you had provided me. Is that where it is where people are using their own personal email addresses to do work functions? And then that is a potential exposure to an organization because they're using their @Gmail as opposed to @abctrucking.com.
Yeah, that's definitely a risk as well. And it's very similar because they may use that @Gmail account to sign up for a ChatGPT account or a Claude account or any one of these different accounts because they want to use that tool and they don't have access to it through their work domain email. And that's really what we're trying to teach is, it's not that you don't want to let your employees use these tools. It's that you need to make sure they're using them securely and they're properly educated around the risks and what to do with them and what not to do with them.
So you had used a couple of different descriptions on AI. It might be a model, but you were saying generative, predictive, and prescriptive AI. How do they differ out there? And then is that one of those things where it's like, hey, your typical ChatGPT is just like a generative style system, and then maybe more of the paid ones are more of predictive and prescriptive, and where you can get more in depth with that?
So if we think about ChatGPT, I'm just going to use that as an example. Yeah. All of these, text generation models are large language generative models. That is really designed for content creation. It's going to create either written content or visual content, and some of them even audio content, some of the newer, music creation models. That's all generative, whether it's a paid model or, a public model. The difference is if we think about, when we talk about predictive and prescriptive, predictive is like what's likely to happen. That's your predictive maintenance. If you use machine learning to understand what's going on with sensors and in your vehicles and kind of predict when a part's going to fail before it does. That's a predictive model, predictive tool. And then prescriptive is like, what do we do about that? Right? So that's more decision making. If you think about routing, you think about route optimization, that would be prescriptive. It's here's the best outcome given the variables that you're putting in.
So how do people vet their vendors for this stuff, right? Because this is one of those things where you sign up for a lot of software, and I've seen that breakdown out there in a lot of the software that we pay for our business, and they don't come out and say predictive and prescriptive and stuff like that. They're like, oh, hey, use this chatbot and tell it all its information, and all of a sudden it spits out all of these things. How many, and you might not even know the answer to this, but how many companies out there are selling this, but they're all using the exact same platform, and we don't even know if that platform's secure, right?
Yeah, it's very similar. What we saw when kind of the cloud migration happened, right? All of the software as a service platforms, they all utilize a number of different infrastructure providers on the back end. So if you think about, the AWS or Azure or these cloud infrastructures, those are underneath, almost all of the software as a service platforms that we interact with. And so if you look at AI powered tools, we go back to kind of those frontier models that I mentioned. We have a small number of players. The big ones are the Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, and Anthropic. Those are kind of the ones that pop into people's heads, but there's a few others. But those are the ones that underlie most of these tools. There's very few companies that are going to go out and train their own model. There are some, but the majority of them are using the functionality underneath are some of these larger models. So there is shared risk across there, and you do need to ask the questions of, how resilient is this? If I'm going to rely on this for operations, what do I have for redundancies and guarantees against an outage? Number one, but you also need to understand their approach to security internally, the organization that you're contracting with.
Yeah, it's, when I was going through and preparing for the show today, there's a lot of I'm trying not to blend a lot of your guys' internal case studies that you guys have put together out there. But, I know talking about like the ELDs and stuff and like its correlation to this, where it's like, there's like 100 ELD companies that are all using the same tech infrastructure of it. It's just a different logo. So it's like if one of them is proven to be easily manipulated, they can just close down and it's already reincarnated. And for me, it's like if I look at a lot of the AI stuff that's out there, knowing that there's only a handful of actual like AI infrastructures available that people can build these large language models off of, it's like, is that going to be another angle that a lot of these cyber criminals are going to be able to infiltrate at some time potentially, or they're going to create their own, and it's going to be kind of like the shadow ELD network that's out there where there's 100 companies all using the exact same infrastructure, and they're just able to shut down and restart essentially overnight. And then that opens up a whole fraudulent level of activities out there.
Yeah. And we see, there's guardrails around a lot of these models or all of these models. There's guardrails around what they can and cannot be used for. But what we do see is the bad actors taking, they have their own models that have been jailbroken, which means the constraints around them, the safety, the guardrails around them have been broken or removed. And so what they're able to do is they have their own infrastructure now where they're building offensive tools off of these models. And they're utilizing some of the same underlying kind of backbone infrastructure, if you will, but they're still utilizing it in a way where they're creating faster and bigger and stronger attack techniques using AI. And unfortunately, the underlying use of these the public well-controlled models, the ones with safeguards, doesn't prevent the bad actors from using them on their side as well.
I mean, is this one of those things where, and it's tough to even put, I think like a logical response to this but it's like, did this go too fast too soon where it almost opened up a window of stuff that most people weren't prepared for, right? Like I know, like I'm not naive to think like AI hasn't been built for years and it's been working in the background and now eventually it was released out to the public. But it seems like it's, if for me personally, if I'm looking back, the last 12 to 14 months have gone from essentially no AI adoption to all AI adoption. And it seems like pretty rapid where it's like there's almost a ton of exposure that the general public has been, led into.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we like you said, we've seen so much progress in the last couple of years compared to, the 10 years before when it comes to AI. Once these large language models were released and became popular, and now it seems like you can't go to a trade show and talk to a vendor without AI powered or AI enabled or some AI bolt on to whatever product it is. And I think part of that is based on because there's such a pace of change in the technology that's causing so much change in our industry, there's a fear of being left behind. And I think that might be encouraging organizations to adopt some of these tools faster than they can build in the governance and the structure and the safeguards around how they're going to use them in their operation. And so, that's really where this framework came from that we put out is how do we not slow down necessarily, but improve and co-develop governance and security around these adoptions of AI powered tools and AI integrations in our organization.
So is this essentially like a step-by-step guide for people to start a implementation of a governance for AI inside of their organization, right? Because again, I think like just speaking from a person whose tech capabilities is just restart my computer when it's not working the way it was 10 minutes prior, is that one of those frameworks where it's like, hey, anybody of any tech level can kind of start out on this and then build this out? Because again, I look at like with where things are today, I don't know what it's going to look like in 6 months from now if we're looking at the rapid adoption of that. But I do know if you don't have any guardrails inside of your organization, it could get really bad really quick.
Yeah. And so this is really written for both leadership and an operational level for security teams, because there is, we start the entire thing with a governance and oversight section. And the reason for that is you have to have governance from your leadership down on setting policy, setting acceptable use standards, really deciding where are the business cases to adopt AI and where do we not want AI involved in our operation. And so that's not a technical process. That's a leadership conversation and a decision and a policy process. And then we do have data and privacy and security and safety and those kinds of more concrete operational controls as well, but it's definitely a dual audience.
Yeah, and you guys are taking such a, I can't think of the right word, but like you guys are attacking this from literally every angle inside of the industry when it comes down, like with the Freight Fraud Prevention Hub and like with Cybersecurity Conference and like the AI framework and the Digital Standards Council. Like you guys have so many initiatives out there to simplify the digital world that we're operating in now, because it is like, from my perspective, it's gotten to the point now where it's like, if you're not implementing this at a very high level, but like the right way, I don't know if you're going to have a sustainable business in the near term. Like, and I'm not saying that hoping anybody goes out of business or anything like that. I'm saying like the adoption is going to be so quick, and it's already been fast. And if you think like, I mean, again, from my seat, we're looking at the last 12 to 16 months, it's gone from like 0 to 10,000. I can only imagine what the next 6 months or the next 3 months are going to bring to the table, because that's how fast all of this stuff is going. And, I think that a lot of people need to take these steps. And, one thing I always love about when I'm, with what you guys have so many free resources for people to go out there to sign up for this stuff, to start educating yourself.
Yeah, that's the big piece is we have to start with the education, and then you have to come up with a strategy. Like you said, we don't want to just be throwing these tools, whether it's an AI tool or any other kind of automation or technology piece. You don't want to just, because it's out there, find a place to plug it into your operation. You really want to think about this strategically and think, what are the business challenges that I'm facing? And what's the best tool to solve that business challenge? Maybe it's a process change. Maybe it's a piece of technology. Maybe it's AI. But we have to be strategic about it, or you quite literally end up painting yourself into a corner with the technology that you've put in your operation. And you suddenly find that you've got all this risk and you're not really sure how to manage it. And that's when bad things start to happen. And so we encourage folks to start with that education piece, and we really try to put those resources out there as far and as wide as we can to help with that.
Yeah, it's, I look at it where it's like data to me now, Ben, is the currency of the future, right? Where it's like, because everybody's data is, like they look at their online tendencies and stuff like that. Like, when I like the cookies and stuff like people are, your digital footprint is the gold rush of the future, right? Because of all of the, I look at it where, even inside of like freight tech, I think the company that cracks the predictive analytics side of this industry of like force ranking systems of how much a load actually is worth compared to what it's posted for. And what I mean by that is the person who creates software that shipper A and shipper B of Dallas to Chicago, one load might pay $500 more, but there's a 80% likelihood you're going to get held up, miss out on your next opportunity. So therefore, the cheaper load on paper is actually the better load for your organization. I think that is where things are. And I think the person who cracks that is going to be like the next gold rush. But again, there's a lot of data that comes through. But what most people don't realize is you already have a digital footprint. Every single individual out there has a trackable way of being marketed to in today's environment. And then you put more proprietary business information inside of there. Like, people are going to pay a lot of money to get access under the hood of a lot of organizations. And I think, like, it's almost like the modern day wild, wild west, right? Like, this is how their people are going to bankrupt their competitors.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. Data is the new gold. And, I would argue it's the gold rush of today. It's because it's already out there. It's already, that drives the entire advertising industry. That drives a lot of, without data, these large language models don't work either. We have to remember that as well. And so that's why they're kind of hoovering up all of the data that they can access in order to continue training them, to continue refining them and making them better.
Is this something that, again, if you look at with a lot of tools for even the driver, for example, is there a way that it's almost going to, could you see a world where it almost backs you into a corner as a driver, where somebody's like the DOT is going to be able to pull your information out of there, and you were using predictive, all of that stuff, and then you've actually, implicated yourself in violations that are now, recorded in your ELDs?
Well, we've seen a lot of the ELDs that have kind of the back end is not secure, and they're, some of these operations, the, ELD tampering as a service, it's just like everything else. It's gone as a service. And we see them using AI to do that, to match up, to fabricate logs and match up locations and timestamps and things like that. So I do think we're going to get better at detecting that kind of thing. Absolutely.
Do you think that would be, again, like you talk about like an access point for some cyber criminals that are out there? Do you think that could almost, again, back to our matter of national security, like people are constantly, because like if you could shut down a trucking company's ELD, where their trucks can't move for the day, like what could that do? Do you think that that's a thing, or a lot of these larger companies, like they have teams of people fighting off threats like that?
Well, they certainly do. The larger companies have larger security budgets and more resources, but they also have a larger attack surface and they're a bigger target. And so, we see big companies in the news all the time from, being a victim of a cyber attack. And that is definitely, if you think about an ELD provider, how many of the large ELD providers are there out there? There's a handful that are a huge percentage of the industry relies on. And so that kind of concentration risk, that is very real if one of those providers is put offline for a long duration. It's definitely a concern.
How, again, like the framework that you guys put together, I put the link out there for people to click on. And this is one of those rare instances where I'm say click on the link and go, because it's a secure website, but sign up for that, because again, I look at with where things are right now and how, like, even people are going to be, like I look at like with the clearinghouse and all the driver data and information that's out there, like all the potential manipulation that could happen. And then if they go on to, do you see and again, this is a random question here, Ben, do you see a day where if a company uses an AI tool to train drivers or do in-cab training based on their metrics for the day, could that potentially be pulled into a lawsuit one day?
That's an interesting question. I think that we do have to be very careful of, again, those business cases that we decide to use AI, and where do we need to keep a human in the loop and a human making those critical decisions? Because especially when you come to safety and training, generative tools, they're probabilistic. They're thinking, if you want to use the term thinking loosely, they're providing you with the most likely next best word every time they generate something. There is no understanding underneath that of safety or compliance as a construct. There's just an ability to generate believable sounding language. Mm-hmm. And so in that situation, you need to be very careful to have a human making these critical decisions and have a human ensuring that there's understanding in the person being trained of the core concepts that the organization wants them to be left with after this training, and not just something that sounds good.
Yeah. That's the thing I think most people don't understand or overlook when it comes to utilizing a tool like ChatGPT, right? Like it is literally giving you the most basic response, but like very fast, right? So people are completely enamored by how quick but like it's not necessarily the best answer. And, and I've done that because like I personally utilize a paid version of Gemini inside of my business. I've created my own kind of prospecting tool that I use out there. And there's been a couple of times where I'm like, no, that's literally false. Like that goes against everything in regards to transportation. And then they're like, oh yeah, after doing more research, I have found out that prompt was false. So again, it's like that surface level response is, I think, what most people take to be truth and gold. And, one thing I had to learn the hard way is like, I got to train my Gemini model to work for me the way I need it done. Otherwise, it does give just most basic and generic responses out there.
Yeah, and hallucination is a real problem. I mean, it's not as bad as it was with some of the earlier models. They're getting better and better about putting guards in against that, but there is no way to prevent that entirely. We've all seen examples, like you said, of something that's just completely false, and they spit it out with such conviction that it's like, and but I equate them to overeager interns that they are going to give you an answer, but it may not be well researched and it may not be well thought out. It may be missing the context, but it's going to be a very believable sounding answer, and that's why you need trained individuals, human individuals, in the process and vetting those responses.
Is this going to be something you guys are going to be talking about at the cybersecurity conference here in a couple months?
Absolutely. This will be a topic of conversation for sure.
Yeah. Again, it's one of those things where I think that, and it's not as somebody who has like little to no tech understanding at all, I think what is refreshing about with a lot of the training that's out there is it is broken down where like the normal layperson can very much comprehend this. Like you don't need to go out and hire, if you have the budget to hire somebody for this role who has background training in it, by all means do that. But I think you can make large steps forward for your organization by very basic training and understanding.
Absolutely. And that's the reason that the resources that we have are developed in the way that they are, because we're not trying to educate your highly sophisticated security professionals on cybersecurity. What we're trying to do is raise the awareness of the people on the front lines in operations that are using these tools, the decision makers in the companies that are deciding on how to set policy and what products to bring into their organization. Those aren't necessarily technical people, but they still need to be able to have resources to rely on to kind of translate the technical into the actionable for them.
Oh, I love it. Ben, thank you so much for your time. The AI governance framework that you guys have, I put the link out there. That's where we need people to go to sign up for that, to get access to that, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. And you can always start at nmfta.org and, you'll be able to find not just the AI framework, but all of our best practice guides and cargo crime prevention methods.
Perfect. I love it. You guys, there's a ton of free research out there for you to utilize at the NMFTA's website. You guys check it out. If you want, come meet me. I'm going to be in Long Beach out there this year at the annual cybersecurity conference. I've been going, this is like my 5th one that I've gone to. And again, it is just, it's like, I don't want to make myself sound like a moron, but when it comes to technology, I kind of am. And it is very digestible there, very much actionable insights you guys can apply to your business. So check that out. If you guys want more information on it, hit me up. I'll gladly put you guys in contact with them. But that's going to be it for today. As always, if you got value in what you heard and you're not subscribed, subscribe to the show, you guys. And if you're feeling ambitious, rank it on iTunes and Spotify, because if you see value, your network's going to see it as well. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys. And we'll be talking to you soon.
Came back with a bang. Window down, yelling out money, anything. Hey, ooh, got the foot on the gas. Pedal to the metal when I'm getting to the bag. Hey, got the foot on the gas. Pedal to the metal when the lane moving fast.